Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Jasmine. I'm seeing some new names popping up too. We've previously done one other FVDA free help, I feel like back in October of last year. So it's been a while. There's been a lot of new features that have been released, but we're going to kind of be going over those today. And feel free, this is kind of an ask me anything. So feel free to drop stuff in the chat. And if it's a lot to type out, just, I think we can also turn on so that you can speak and just ask your question, because I know that can be a lot of typing. And we can kind of go from there. But introductions for me, my name is Jordan. I'm one of the FVDA and Demands AI optimizers over here at VineSkills. Also dabble a little bit in immigration AI if any of you guys are interested. So I previously worked at Filevine for a couple of years alongside Jasmine here, and now we're both over at VineSkills. So we're here today to just kind of go over more FVDA things. I think today I was maybe just going to start with the settlement calculator because I'm sure you guys probably saw all of that new information come out and that it is free to any Filevine user. So maybe we could kind of start there, see if you guys have any questions, and then, we can just always take some more in the chat. So feel free if there's like a burning question you have, or maybe you're already using FVDA and you're like, hey, something's not working right on my template. This is a great time to also pop that in the chat and we can definitely give you guys some feedback. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm also getting distracted by my window. It's like snowing a lot outside, so I'll try not to look at that too much. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen here and we can get started.
Hopefully you're staying warm, Jordan. I'm like the exact opposite. It's finally back sunny in California, so I'm like loving this sunshine.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's been fun. A little chilly today for sure. So So perfect. I was going to start with the settlement statement, settlement calculator. As some of you may have heard, it is a free gift that Filevine is giving out. So, we're happy to go ahead and share that with you guys, answer any questions on it. We are doing free setups, and I see we already have a question in the chat as well. About some integration. So, and just to touch on the settlement calculator real quick is that it is free. It is about a 50-minute call to get you guys all set up in it. And then there's no obligations after that. If you want to just use it and like it, Filevine is giving it out for free. But if not, if you want to actually build out some other templates, we can always chat as well. And I see, Jasmine, you are answering Tracy's message here as well, but we can also answer it now if that's easier.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I think that the lead docket integration is subscribed because it's being pushed directly in from lead docket into there, and so that integration needs to be subscribed in order to properly communicate with the project on what to bring over. The Filevine one is set to not be subscribed to any of the projects, but you'll still not want to mess with that. That's in case you do have any integrations. That's kind of the user that they'll use to make sure that everything is set up and good to go, but it does not need to be subscribed to any project in order for things to still run.
Amazing. Awesome. Thanks, Jasmine, for knowing all the things, even FVDA, Filevine, and lead docket. So we appreciate you. So we can just go ahead and jump in some more about the settlement calculator, and then we'll just watch the chat for questions here. But basically, the purpose of this is to kind of get rid of your disbursement fusion. I'm not sure if any of you guys are currently using that, but if you haven't ever built a fusion, I am envious of you because they can sometimes take a lot of time, patience, effort, all kinds of things. And so this is supposed to be the more dynamic and also more user-friendly way of doing that. So Filevine recently released how you can actually, do calculated fields. So right here, we can see that this is actually a formula field where we're actually pulling in a lot of those variables that are actually going to be pulling in from Filevine. And just a recap here, in case there's any new folks joining us, and FVDA might not, you might not be up on all the lingo, but these are what we call connected variables, these teal variables, and they're going to be pulling in information from your Filevine. So it works very similarly to a docgen, right, where you can put in those replacement codes and it's going to pull in data. However, docgens have some limitations, right, where you're only able to pull in one collection section item or one collection section at a time. FVDA, you can pull in from multiple collection sections. So you can see here, if we scroll a little bit further down, we're pulling in from our liens section, we're pulling in from meds, and we're also pulling in from expenses. So we can pull in from all three of those collection sections. We can either have these nice tables or we can have standalone codes here, and we're able to pull in all that information without making it into a Fusion, which is the best part about all this. So just a little overcap or recap there is that when I was talking about these calculated currency fields, which are relatively new, I think they came out maybe in the fall, maybe early fall of last year. But basically, as you can see here, we can pull in fields from Filevine and then, put in whatever formula we have. Obviously here we're doing a dispersal to the client, so it's going to just be a lot of subtraction, maybe a little bit of addition depending on how you're, maybe if you had like some adjustments or, kind of write-offs going on. But basically you can go through and code this all out with your needs. So just starting up here, you can see some of this information we say copy from the overview. This is just because it's a template, but typically when we would go in, we would choose alongside you as the client, kind of guiding us through what you would need is where we want to pull in, your settlement amount from. You can either obviously pull it in if you have a maybe settlement section or a KPI section. Sometimes I see it living in the case summary section as like the, final settlement. So wherever you have it, we can definitely pull in that settlement amount. Or we can use what's called an outlaw variable. If you're just joining us, an outlaw variable are these purple codes. It is a variable that has to be manually selected within Outlaw. Outlaw is this software that the settlement calculator is built on. I know Outlaw, FVDA, it's also sometimes called Document Assembly, has a million names. It's super confusing, but don't worry, they're all kind of the same thing. And so basically what you could do here is if you weren't for some reason tracking the settlement amount in your Filevine, or sometimes I know people have like maybe when they're like doing a projected settlement and they just kind of want to see potentially, what they would disperse to the client or what the settlement would be. You could also pull in that information here and kind of make a mock-up almost yield section similarly to what Filevine had. So and I see your question in here, Tracy. So let's see here. Is there any reason I should not launch this if we may decide not to actually use it? I want to be able to play with it before the staff uses it and understand how to use it and set it up. Will you be showing us how this will look in a Filevine project? So, like if there's a recording to share with their colleague. Yeah, we can definitely, I think we have one that might be fully set up that we can kind of demo. But yeah, we could definitely go over it. There's not really any reason why you shouldn't take the free setup. It's honestly free. I know it's hard to believe, but basically what we do when we actually set this up is we can come in here and we change the type to settlement calculator, which basically notifies Filevine that you will not be charged for this template. The only caveat here is that you can only have one of these settlement calculator templates. So, if you were to make any more templates in Filevine or FVDA, because you're like, oh, I really love this software, they will start charging you for those. And if you have more than one settlement calculator template, you will also be charged for that additional one. So we try to definitely just keep it at one, so you make sure you don't incur any of those additional costs that can kind of sneak up on you. But there's really no downside to having us set it up in 50 minutes. You play around with it and see if you even like it, because then it's just free and it's yours. And then I think that their hope is that you will love FVDA too, and hopefully want to add on additional products or anything like that. So I think that's kind of where they're coming from. But yeah, definitely no reason you shouldn't do it. And we're also happy to assist you if you haven't already been paired up with a Filevine implementation partner to kind of help you set it up, because there is a lot of background kind of setup process that we have to do with like API keys and everything that you wouldn't just be able to do on yourself. So yes, and I see you said we already have doc templates in Filevine, so this would just complement that. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that most of the clients that we work with, honestly, they sometimes have a hybrid, right? They have all their docgens and then they're doing maybe like more complex documents, maybe they're fusions. We see a lot of complaints, a lot of court documents, because a lot of times it's a lot easier to generate those in FVDA with the additional, dynamic fields that we have. But you could still just keep using your docgen templates. We also have some folks that hire us or also want to build it out themselves and transfer all their docgen templates over to FVDA because they like it so much. So the choice is totally up to you. And hopefully after today, you'll have a few more of your questions answered and, you can make a decision there.
Yeah, and I will note that it is easier for most folks to be able to edit this document as opposed to a fusion, which is where most of your settlement statements are being housed. The codes that are in fusions and the way that it needs to be laid out is sometimes, there's a big learning curve for that. And so this has less of a learning curve. And again, is a little bit easier for folks to kind of manage, maintain, update, things like that.
Absolutely. Perfect. So like you were saying, Tracy, maybe it'd be nice to see a demonstration. So what I'm going to do now is actually pull in a lot of these fields that typically we'd be going through with the client being like, hey, where do you want to pull this in from? All of that. I'm just going to be the client in this instance, and I'm going to go ahead and make that decision and put in these codes so that we can maybe generate one together, and then maybe we'll have some more questions there. So we can go ahead and do that. So I'm just pulling in these. Basically, these are just the choices. Case cost total. We'll probably also want to pull in here. And then let's see, expense request is the one. Now, if you're new to using FVDA, I was obviously copying and pasting some stuff in because I already had these codes pulled up. But if you've never actually added in a code, I'm going to show you how easy it is now. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to go ahead and do an open bracket. If you ever do an open bracket when you're first working in FVDA and for some reason you don't get this pop-up that we're seeing here with all these variables, it likely means that you're not connected back to Filevine. Or, you can also connect to Salesforce and some other integrations as well. But for the most part, I'd say we're connecting to Filevine. So what you would need to do then is you would need to come up to this gear at the top of your document, and then you would need to navigate over to connections here. From here, you can see that I already have one set up, but in the event that maybe I connected this to a different section than I wanted to, I could actually just hit edit connection. And I can come down here and actually change the section that I connected it to. Right now, we're just in case summary, which is not a big deal, but you can also choose the project type you want to connect it to. So say you have maybe one for like personal injury, maybe you have a criminal template. You can have different templates based on those different project types or templates within Filevine. So you can see here, we have a ton of project types, but for most users, you might only have a few that you would want to connect to. So you need to make sure that you select which project type or template in Filevine you want to connect to, which section name, and this is only for the purposes of basically coming in and pushing that document generation button, right? So if you're familiar with using docgens, you have that button that's embedded somewhere in your Filevine section. You push it, it starts generating the document, starts bringing in that information. It works the same way with FVDA. We physically have to have a location where that button lives. But it doesn't really matter where it lives because you're going to be able to pull in all of the data from Filevine. So, multiple collection sections, it doesn't matter. This is more for just like where you physically want to push the button. And if you are a settlement calculator user or you plan to be, you can also connect this to your Filevine yield section. This is an older section that for the most part was no longer supported by Filevine, but you do have the ability, or we rather have the ability now to actually embed a widget in that section. So instead of doing a lot of the yield generation, which has some limitations, right? I think you can only pull in like some meds items and like, some other settlement info. You can actually just embed the widget there for Outlaw. And when I say widget, it's just that button that you're going to push to generate. So you can actually embed that there and generate this settlement calculator or disbursement sheet. So once we've made all those selections, you would just hit update or make connection and you'd be good to go. But basically here, just getting back into how to add in that variable, we can come in here. We're going to do that open bracket. The next thing you want to do is a plus sign. As soon as I do a plus sign, this is going to start showing me all the fields that are in my Filevine. Now, obviously, if you're like us, you probably have a ton of fields, so I would not recommend scrolling through. Instead, I would start typing in a common phrase that might yield, a field for us to see. So what we're going to do here, we're looking to pull in this expenses. We're actually going to pull in this expense total from down here. So I would start typing out, I accidentally clicked off of it, but I'm going to start typing out expense. And this is coming from the expense request. So I'm going to click into this one. You can see I have two different options. I have the option to insert an entire table, which is what we have down here, or I can just insert the expense request amount, which is going to be this total, and it's going to be this column total here. So that's the one I want in this situation, and I'm going to pull this one in just because obviously I don't want this whole table going up here if we already have it. So let's go ahead and select this one. You can see when I added that in that everything is now kind of grayed out here. Typically, when you add in a Filevine connected field, you want to see this nice teal color up here. Because these are still Filevine connected fields, but they're pulling from the totals of these columns. And as you can see, there's nothing currently filled in here. These will display as gray. Typically, when you're working in FVDA, if things display as gray or red, it's not usually a good sign. It means something's not working, maybe something's not connected properly. But as we're setting this up together, it's okay for these things to be gray or red for this instance, just because there's no data pulled into there currently. So we basically have all of this sorted. The last thing we need to do is check our client dispersal formula. So I already made this previously. I'm just going to double check because I think I wasn't pulling in potentially the case cost, and maybe we just go through and do this whole thing together. So it's a learning experience. So let's just delete the whole thing. What you can do, you can come up here and like copy all of these and paste them in if you want. And then obviously in between each of those codes, you could put like, is this subtracting or is this, is this addition that we're doing? But basically we could just go through and do that. But to show you guys just from the beginning so that you guys can also get a good feel for it, let's just do it together and type it in. So obviously the first thing we want to choose, we're going to start off with our settlement amount because we're going to, for the most part, be subtracting everything. At least that's how I understand it, but I'm also not the best at math. So let's go ahead and give that a try. We're going to just type in here. I'm going to type in total settlement. So you can see that this is matching the code name that's up here. So we want to pull that in. Then we're going to do minus. And then we're just going to start typing in all of these ones, except I need to add in my little plus sign there so that I can see everything. So we can do that. And we might not even need the fee. We might just need to pull in the attorney fees, probably not the percentage. That's just a good thing to show. So I'm going to do that instead. And let's see, total attorney fees, great. Let's subtract the expenses now. Something to note as you're going through and you're actually pulling in the totals for, liens or medicals or expenses is there's a little difference of a code that you want to make sure you can pull in. For the most part, we can see here that there is like a dash or a hyphen right here, like an underscore. I just lost those because I didn't save it, but that's okay. I'm going to copy and paste them in. It's not going to be a big deal. We can actually go in, and when we're adding in those fields, you can see that this amount, there's like a period in between. It might be really small, but there is one. And when we're pulling in these column totals, we need to make sure we have that period in there. If we don't, it's not going to pull in the correct information. So that could cause, your formula to be off or just not show up at all. So, and rookie mistake, I didn't save this. So we're just going to do it together. I'm doing my little copy and paste situation that I was telling you guys about. So that should be fine. We don't need the fee percentage. And then we can start adding in those other ones here. So then we're going to do minus, and we're going to do the expense. We're going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to add this in from the expense report collection section. And then you can notice there, as soon as I clicked that and it stopped, the code's not finished because there's not a bracket on the other end. And I'm getting this little exclamation point, which is like, it's invalid. So we want to start typing amount. And you can see now that that period amount that we were talking about earlier shows up. So we go ahead and add that in. We're going to also do the meds here. So we got meds. And then that should be final balance due. That looks correct as well. And let's see, we're going to do liens. Perfect. That should be everything we need. We're going to hit update. You can see this client dispersal is still showing as red, but like we said, that's because we don't have any data pulling in quite yet. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up our Filevine sandbox so that we can actually go through and generate this together. While I'm doing that, any other questions maybe about the settlement calculator or just other questions about how to add things in?
Yep. So the good thing about FVDA widgets or documents is that they can be placed in any section, regardless of what information that they're pulling. So I know typically for DocGens, if you're pulling liens information, it has to be in the liens section. If you're trying to pull collection info from liens, medicals, and expenses, you can't even do a DocGen. It has to be a Fusion. With Outlaw or FVDA documents, you can literally house it anywhere and it will pull in the info correctly. You just go into Customs Editor and add a widget to whatever section you connected it in. Jordan showed you at the very beginning how to connect it to a section. It's just as easy to also change the section. So if you start off and you're like, I want this in my case summary, and then after a little while, you're like, I actually prefer it in my intake, you can just come back into the document, change where it's connected, and just make sure you have a widget in that new section, and you're good to go.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much, Jasmine, while I was getting that ready. And also, Tracy, just to show you how easy it is to add in the widget, I'm just back here in the customs editor. Obviously, you will have to have advanced access. You guys can still see my screen, right? Hopefully. So, but basically you can just come in here to customs editor. You would choose, which of your sections you want to add that into. Let's just say for some reason, I want to add this into case summary. You can add this in wherever you'd like. I typically add them in, at the bottom, and you can just come in here, hit add field or widget, navigate over to the widget section. And then you can select the Outlaw widget template. From there, you're going to have two different options. You're going to have the option to choose in project. That means basically any template that's connected to your case summary will show up in the same widget. The other option is to choose now, and then you can only choose a specific template that you would like to show up in that widget. So you could have it locked down to like just show your settlement calculator if you wanted to. What I will say is because some people have built this out, previously maybe with DocGens, and you would have one whole section where you were just generating your forms, right? Something like that. Because Outlaw is more dynamic, if you have multiple of these choose now widget means it's supposed to be locked down to one template in that section. It's actually going to show all of them because technically they're all connected to that widget in that section. So that's like kind of one thing, if you're going to have a lot of them there. I always tell people maybe like put it in the section that you're going to be, looking at the information in, like if it was like a meds request, maybe put in your meds section because you're already there. It's a less clicks to go over to your form section, then click on the button. So like, it's more efficient to kind of just keep it there. But basically, you would just choose what you wanted. You can name the widget whatever you want. I typically like to name it, the section it's in. So like case summary. And then I like to always put FVDA in there so people know like, hey, this isn't DocGen. This isn't like another widget type. This is specifically for FVDA. And then you can always say like templates. But honestly, this part you can name whatever you want. And then you would just pick obviously where you want this to live. And then you would hit create. And that's kind of it. And then you were all good to go and you'll be able to start generating those documents.
If you don't have Outlaw currently, for the settlement calculator that is free, you'll need to connect with a partner in order to get that going. So, we could probably help you out with that. If you're already working with another partner, you would likely just go with them to go ahead and set up your settlement calculator. We would go in provision and Outlaw org for you. and then be able to set up this settlement calculator. If you'd like FVDA, so Tracy, you mentioned it's going to be great for maybe some stuff that you currently have in your intake section or stuff that you're currently using as fusions where you're like, it's breaking or I'm having to update it and it's just completely complicated to do that. You can always chat with your account manager, or if you send us your company name, we can reach out to Filevine to see who your account manager is to talk about getting that added onto your sales order. So that way you all can put in more documents than just the settlement calculator. And there are a few ways I see that you also mentioned, like testing, do not use. You don't necessarily have to put the document in Filevine to see what it looks like. Maybe after Jordan's done, we can show you how to add in so that you can test just from Outlaw, so that as you're working on this document or any documents, again, if you choose to get FVDA, you at least know how to test it within Outlaw so that anything that's still under construction isn't turned on for folks to start generating.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and we can take a look at this together. Basically now, obviously, this should be a familiar sight for most of you guys. We are now in Filevine and we are getting ready to generate our document. For us, our settlement calculator is in our case summary. So we just came to the case summary section. I went ahead and selected from our drop down here that I wanted to generate a settlement statement. Now, the nice part is, and this question gets asked a lot, is the file naming convention. You know, in DocGens, obviously you can use replacement codes. You know, I think a lot of people use like the project client name with like, you know, the squiggly brackets on either end. You can pop that in there. You can pop in dates like that, and it'll kind of auto, basically auto name that. The nice thing about FVDA too is that it will typically be named off of whatever we name the template. However, you do have the ability to come in here and you can add more information. If you wanted to, you're going to be able to freely type that out. So you can come in here, you can say settlement statement for Harry Potter. You wanted to add like today's date, something like that. You can add all that in and it's not as rigid and locked down compared to DocGen. So we can go ahead and do that if you wanted to. The only reason that this is showing up here, and this is something I can also show you guys back on the back end because we didn't really touch on it. But typically this information, and it will just pull in directly from Filevine. As you can see, I can start typing out the client's name, Harry Potter here. And it'll automatically pull in just like using a regular contact card field in Filevine. And then I can search for I'm trying to think who my attorney is here. I think is it Albus? Dumbledore, there he is. And you can also just search using this, but the only reason that this is pulling up, because typically this would just pull directly from Filevine, you wouldn't have to kind of do this extra step. But the only reason that we're confirming that is because we have a signature block down here. So, you know, most folks, when they're sending out a settlement or a disbursement sheet, they want to get that signature of the client, right? To be like, hey, you agreed to this, we're paying you this much, you're aware of everything, right? So this is a signature block, and these are native in Outlaw. You can actually send out, you can get electronic signatures, you can have this print off as like a wet signature, if you will, and these will just be, you know, a signing line. So you have that option, but I do know a lot of folks are already really happy with VineSign and are already using that. So in the event that you didn't want to, you know, get the signatures here, you can actually remove these and then just basically send this through VineSign just as you would to get a signature. So you have a couple of different options. This is totally customizable based on the firm. So just know that that is why we are seeing these couple of fields here. But that honestly changes. So that'll just be depending on you guys. So I went ahead and already generated one of these. You can see down here, we have the date generated, very similar to how you can see it in DocGen. We can also hit show all. We can like see all the things that I've ever generated here. So you do have that ability to kind of see everything at a high level as well. If you ever wanted to come in here and maybe check the status of any documents, you can always click on these. This is called a status here, and you can see this. If I click on it, it's going to say status is already up to date. Sometimes it'll change because maybe, you know, a lot of these are in setup phase, but you can see this one's in a done phase. That means we've fully executed the document. We've gone through, we've filled out everything, we've sent it out. So sometimes the statuses will be different. We can see this one's also in review. So these are all statuses that we can actually customize in the back end for you. For the most part, they're not super important, especially not for the settlement calculator, but they become really important in things like demands AI or anything like that. So we can go ahead now. I'm going to go ahead and open this one that I already generated. You can see now this opens up is what we call an iframe or kind of a split screen. If it's too small for you, you can also slide this over. Maybe you don't want to see any of the data that's behind you in Filevine or get distracted. You can do that as well, but that is totally customizable too. Now, this settlement statement overview, a lot of this you don't need to worry about. We're already pulling this in. You can see that some information is already populating. This is me just for more of like a setup purposes as I'm walking folks through this. So let's not even take a look at that. Let's look at your finalized document that we have here. So we can see here, this is a test project. So some of the things that I'm pulling in might not be fully filled out yet, but that's okay. Instead of having to go back to Filevine and fill these out, I can click into these blue variables here, like this like the total settlement, and I can go ahead and update that. So I can go ahead, let's just put in a bunch of money. It was going to be a big settlement, big deal here. 3 million, that's great. So I can go ahead and fill that in, and now you can see that these numbers are starting to calculate a little bit better here. You can also see that this is technically off by a line. That's just because this variable has a really long name, but as soon as I make a choice here, I think most time we do the percentage and it says use fraction, not decimal. We'll see how this goes. I haven't ever entered one like that. We'll see if it likes that. It didn't like that. That's fine. It says not to use a decimal, but like, let's see what happens. That wasn't right either. I think it's probably supposed to be this, maybe. 33%. Jasmine shaking her head. She's like, yes, she's my math person. So I'm going to trust her on that. But you can see that now everything is on the right line because now we have that variable name that's gone. It's just actually filling in what the variable is. So obviously for you guys, best practice is to have this filled out in Filevine. I did not because this is a test case, but you can fill it out once you're in here. You also have the option, just because while we're on that, is a remote sync option. The only reason I want to bring this up is because a lot of this information you can actually do, you can have it pushed to Filevine. So say I update it here because I didn't fill in my settlement amount, I can update it here in Outlaw and it's going to push into my Filevine section because, they're sharing a code. And so that data is mapped there. So I could come in here, I could pull in and set that up if I wanted to, or maybe I'm like, I just want to put this in once. I want to send this out and like be done with it. So you have a couple of different options there. Some other fields also have the ability to do what's called a bidirectional, which means that if information is updated in Filevine, it's going to push into Outlaw. If information is updated in Outlaw, it's going to push into Filevine. So that's always really good too. As you can see here, we have some information in these tables, just kind of as we're talking about, Filevine syncing, is that some of this can be edited. If we click into here, we can sync this row to Filevine. So maybe we made an update because maybe this lien was the incorrect amount. I changed it here because I'm the person that knows all the things. I can hit sync this row to Filevine. It's going to update your information back into your Filevine lien section, which is really nice, right? You don't have to backtrack. You don't have to be like, okay, I got to go, put in liens over here. I got to close out of this. So that's really nice as well. All right, let's put in our attorney fees here. I mean, I think on this case, like I really earned it. Like I did a great job. I think I put enough zeros. I think I did great. So basically that is going to pull in there. This might not actually be accurate because it probably should obviously the attorney fee percentage of this amount, but whatever, it's all good. We'll work with your guys's formula and we can develop it there. But basically I have all that pulled in. You can see everything now has been populating. Now, something I didn't show you guys is that sometimes when we actually generate this, so let's come here, let's reselect our liens. Basically, when you first come into here, you're going to have to make a decision on which liens, medicals, and expenses you want to pull in. Or if there's other collection sections you're referencing. I set a calculator up for a client today, and they were pulling in information from their accounting section. So you would have to select, whether it's going to be all of them or just like a single one of these that you want to pull in for liens. Obviously, for liens, we only have one. and we're going to go ahead and update. But as we come over here to medicals, you can see we have quite a few. So maybe I selected all of these, but they're not all accurate. Maybe instead of selecting all, I just want to select the Intergalactic Hospital, Hermione Granger, and Madame Pomfrey. I'm not going to do this test provider. It looks like we didn't pay him anything anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And we could hit update. I could also maybe choose to leave off this one. And then I can hit update, and you can see now my total has changed for these medical totals. So, this is obviously going to change my disbursement to the client. I think before it was like 2.3 million. Now it's a little bit more. So, you can kind of play around with this data and choose what you want to pull in. Same is going to be true with expenses, right? So you can always come in here, you can reselect. I think there's only one expense as well. So it doesn't really matter there, but you can pick and choose which ones you want. And then you're able to pull those in. So it's pretty cool. It's nice to see this finalized product. Obviously, we can see here, when I first generated this, I didn't put in my client name. So let's just put in Harry Potter here. I think also we don't have our project incident date filled in, tisk on us, but it's fine. Normally this would pull in for your project incident date. I also see sometimes people put here, maybe they want to pull in the, I don't want a red line. You can also, this is a great point, you can also edit these paragraphs or sections here. So when you first click into it, it's going to be defaulted to red line. This means that you're going to be basically proposing changes, not actually making them. So if I want to actually make a change, I'm going to uncheck that and I'm going to put in here, and I want to pull in a new variable. I want to try and pull in we're going to pull in the project case number, hit save. It should pull it in. It's not, because I guess I'm doing a demo, so it's just gonna not work for me right now, but it should be pulling in your project number there. And then you can actually add in other variables like that, or you could come in here and I could also just like type out additional information if I wanted to include it in that paragraph. Cool. That was a lot of information, I'm sure. But basically, I mean, this looks pretty good. This looks like everything is basically filled out. The only thing we'd want to update is like the firm name. We'll put Vine Skills. And then basically what would happen now, we've filled in all of these variables except for the two up here. Let me just fill those in so you guys can see what happens to our status up here. I don't know, a date. What's today? It's not today, but we'll do 2023, so it makes sense. Okay, we'll just fill in some things here. All of that, awesome. So this has been all finalized. I think the only reason this isn't going from setup is because we have a bunch of stuff over here as well. So we could just put in things, doesn't matter. It's all fake. So we can fill those in. And now you can see this move to the draft phase, which means we are pretty much good to go with this document. But as you can see here, I haven't sent this out to get signatures. So that's why it hasn't progressed to the last phase. Now, obviously, like we said, this is an option that you have as a settlement calculator user. You can send it out directly from here, get those signatures, or you could come up here and you could download maybe as a PDF, as a Word doc, and then send that out to your client, maybe if you wanted a wet signature. So you have a couple of different options. As you can see here, it is prompting me at the bottom to go ahead and share this with Harry Potter, aka my client. So I can come down here and I can hit share if I wanted to. It's going to give me an option to share via email or share as a link. For the most part, I think if you're sending this out externally, meaning not to somebody on your team, you would want to share via email, because you can just come in here and pop in their email address there, which we should already have because likely it was already filled out from over here. We have his fake email. And then this is a pre-populated message that we can choose. We can also add additional information to the message if we wanted to. We could specifically say, hey, this is your settlement for your case. Please sign and review, whatever you want to say. And then basically, obviously, as it says, Harry Potter is now going to get an email from us saying that, hey, insert law firm name here has sent you a document to review for your settlement. So please review and sign. So that's kind of how it would work. It's pretty nice that it's built in like that. But if you don't want to, obviously you can come up here and you can download that PDF and you can kind of see how that looks like. But you can see as the PDF, we have this filling in. It's looking good. And then because we downloaded it as a PDF instead of sending it out electronically, here we have those wet signature lines that we were talking about. I'm going to pause there. Any questions about the settlement calculator? Hopefully that was a good enough demo to at least get you there. But yeah.
And for the folks that already have FVDA and are maybe putting other documents besides the settlement calculator in, that overview is a way for you to be able to select all of the data or some of the data that you want filled out in this document so that your staff doesn't get overwhelmed by trying to scan through the document to see where exactly that they need to actually fill information out. It does indicate with blue arrows or flags, as we saw in the document, where they need to fill it out, but this overview gives a very simple, hey, here's everything that you need to fill out so that when they go into the document, it's already generated with all of the data necessary, again, so that they're not having to scroll to find all of those blue flags. Really helpful on documents that are more than a page or more than a few pages, because that could be quite a few scrolls. And it is customizable to each template that you do. You can type in kind of whatever content you want, or even just reminders. Maybe it's not necessarily stuff that they need to fill out, but just reminders that you want them to note or be aware of when they're coming into this document.
Absolutely. That's a great point as well. And something else I wanted to touch on just because as I was looking here is that if you ever wanted to, kind of just collaborate on a document, maybe a settlement statement, maybe, more so some other core documents that you guys were planning on sending out if you chose to go, with FVDA and build some out in there. The really nice thing is instead of having to like exchange emails and go back and forth and, get people to sign off on things, you can actually come into here and besides like proposing the changes, which if you do make any changes, something I should note here is that it'll tell you that there's a version. So we can see we're on version 3 because I've updated this 3 times. I can click here and I can actually see all the different changes that were made, and I can actually toggle on and off like to show the differences. So that's pretty cool. And you can always restore a previous version in case you're like, either you or maybe like somebody else you worked with, which I'm sure this never happens, mess something up and you're like, we got to roll this back. So you can always do that. It's a really nice feature. But something else you can do instead of actually commenting or proposing directly in a section is you can actually come over here and you can comment. So the comments are nice. This is something that is obviously just used internally. And you can make a comment here, like maybe like, please review. You can comment. Anybody who is a user on this document, which you can always invite more team members in, is going to get an email. Right now, we already had shared this with Harry Potter, but if we hadn't shared this, he's not going to be on there right now. And also they're only a signer. When people are only signers, they're not going to be able to make any changes because that's not their role. So you would be able to come in here and like, if you wanted to add teammates, I can come and look through, I can come in here and add Jasmine because I'm like, Jasmine, you got to come and fix this. I don't want to do it anymore. You can come in here and add her in, and then she's going to get an email notification that says like, hey, Jordan added you into this, please review. You can also come in here, you can edit your comment. You can say, please review, the 3rd paragraph or whatever you want to say and hit comment again. And then when you're working in here, if Jasmine comes in here, she actually has a couple of different options to reply back to me. Obviously, she can comment back saying everything looks fine, you're being crazy. Or she can also come up here and say, okay, yeah, I've made this change, let's resolve it. If you resolve it here, you can notice that there's no longer a kind of blue icon there drawing your attention to it. But if I click into it, you can see that this has been resolved and it'll say who resolved it, which is really nice. The other option you have is the clear option. If you hit clear, like it says, it's going to delete the comments and resolve the thread. So maybe like we're good to go. We want to do that. Then all the comments are gone. We can click back into it and see nothing's there. The nice thing about the comment feature is if you were to download this or send it to a client, they're not going to see those comments because that's happening internally. And so it's a nice way to kind of keep track of everything instead of having to like send emails or Slacks or like Teams messages, however you guys are operating internally. You can kind of just do all your edits, proposes, changes, and like discussion within the document. Cool. Well, I talked to you guys a bunch. I'm not seeing a lot of other questions, but we can kind of take some more time and I know we're right at about time. We got, I think, maybe 3 minutes left. So any last minute questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. If not, hope this was helpful. And if you need any help with FVDA or setting up a settlement calculator, and we didn't have time today, but if you have questions on Demands AI, Immigrations AI, please let us know and we're happy to assist.
Jordan, if you could show them how to run it in Outlaw without having to run the document in Filevine.
Absolutely, let's do it. So I am back in Outlaw now, and I'm going to go over to what's called my contracts repository. This is actually where all of your contracts will live. So if we go here, we can see here's the settlement statement we were just working on in Filevine. I can actually open it here, which is kind of nice. I can come back here now that this one's been generated and I can see the same document and like I still have the same functionality, right? I can comment, make changes, do the whole thing. You basically it's everything you can do in Filevine. But if you wanted to run one without running it through Filevine, which is what we want to do, right? Or
So I think more so if you're still trying to figure out your template's under construction and you're just make sure that
oh,
it's running properly.
gotcha. Okay, I see what you're saying now. So if you want to basically do a test without running it in Filevine and maybe like clogging up a project, you can actually go into your template. So we're going to go ahead over here and edit template. And we're in the template section in Outlaw. So it's just this one that looks like all the papers stacked on top of each other. We're going to go over there. We're going to go over to preview as, and we're going to say flow web. And this is going to allow you to pull in information. But before we even get to that step, we need to make sure that we have what's called a proofing ID in. So we're going to go over to connections. And we're going to hit edit connection because I don't think I have a proofing ID. I sure don't. So here's the proofing ID. You can see it's optional. The proofing ID is basically just the project ID from Filevine. So that will allow you to pull in information. So let's go back to our Harry Potter case that we were working on. This right up here at the top is my project ID. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to bring this over here, paste it in. I'm going to get rid of that backslash. We don't need that. We just need the number. I'm going to hit update. Once I update it here, the nice thing is that it's going to start pulling in that information from Filevine. So we're going to let it sync. It says it's all good. I like to give it one more refresh just because I have trust issues. And then we can go ahead and preview as. So we're going to go ahead and do that next step, preview as flow web. Again, we're not going to look at the overview right now. But you can see this is how it looks before I made any selection. So then I would come in here. I would start selecting my liens like we did before. I'm going to do all of them. We're going to do liens here. Let's select our medicals. I'm going to pick all of them again. You can, of course, only pick some if you want to. But you can see as I'm selecting stuff, these values are being filled in. This is still saying error because I haven't filled in all of these up here and because they're not pulling in from Filevine because I didn't fill in my Filevine because that was silly. But they're going to be pulling in there. The last thing I would need to do, obviously, we're going to put in that statement amount. I don't know how many zeros. It'll be fine. There we go. And then if I learned anything, it should be this. And then I'm just making up some attorney fees. I'm trying to make all the numbers match so we have a similar dispersal like we were doing. But what's nice about this is that it's obviously not clogging up anything in your Filevine as you saw before when we were over here. And the nice thing is if I close out of this, it's going to save all my changes. You don't have to hit save on anything. But see, these are all the tests I've run. Obviously, if you're running a ton of tests, maybe in a client project because they have all the information filled in versus like a test project, it's going to make it look really kind of dirty and cumbersome there. So it's always nice to be able to use this preview as and see that and check to make sure everything's working before actually generating it in Filevine. Because even though we already generated in Filevine, we know everything's working. We can also see it's working here. So yeah.
Also super nice if you're like, hey, this document isn't necessarily up to where I need it to be, but I just want to check on what I've already done. You can definitely run it through here. The thing to note is that proofing ID, you'll probably want a project that has at least most of the information that you're looking for filled out. That way you can get the best representation possible of what your document will look like when you actually run it through Filevine. Perfect. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. Thank you so much, Jordan, for all of your knowledge and sharing it with kind of all of us here today. In the chat, I put several links, one to our upcoming free help sessions so that you all can see kind of what the next sessions are going to look like, one to past recordings so that you can always do that. And then if you all are currently in Filevine and you need any optimization services Filevine wise, or if you're interested in FVDA, you can feel free to reach out to us. I also put our emails there in the chat. If you have any questions about any of the services Vine Skills offers, again, feel free to reach out. We run the gamut on all things Filevine, so would love to help you all be as successful as possible in Filevine and all of its platforms.
And we also have hourly help now available as low as $2.25 a month. So, you know, if our monthly prices aren't really in your budget or you don't want to hang out with us for a whole month, I get it. Come check out our hourly prices. They're a lot better. So
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jordan. If you all need anything again, feel free to reach out. If not, thanks so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.
bye.